Are you a Christian who celebrates LGBTQ pride, or one who is sympathetic toward those who do? Well, I want to make a bit of an appeal to you. Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to Psycho Bible, babbling about psychology and theology. I just had my first op-ed with the Christian Post published this week, and it's a Christian psychotherapist appeal to LGBTQ-affirming Christians. So yes, this is another video on LGBTQ pride during June, Pride Month, but I do not want this to be just another video that just rallies the troops of conservative Christians who are already outraged over the licentiousness and moral decay that they see infecting society and the church. I want to make an appeal to those Christians or those who are in the church who are sympathetic to those who identify somewhere in the LGBTQ plus conglomeration. Even to those who adhere to the doctrine that marriage is only between a man and a woman, yet they view LGBTQ-identified individuals as some sort of marginalized group deserving of compassion. There are those in the church who desire to remain doctrinally faithful while avoiding the animus that comes from, or at least is associated with, a certain strain of fundamentalism. And of course, there are those who have chosen progressive, revisionist theology that fully affirms the range of sexuality concepts within LGBTQ. If I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, I can see how Christians who are either fully or partially affirming of LGBTQ self-concepts may be doing so out of a sincere desire to demonstrate compassion. Tiffany Arbuckle Lee, better known as the Christian music artist Plum, one of my personal longtime favorites, comes to mind as an example. Not to mention a few others over the past few years, such as Kevin Max from DC Talk, another one of my longtime favorites. But with Tiffany, when June 1st rolled around this year, she posted on her Facebook page a rainbow with the following caption: "Happy Pride Month! To all my LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters, I see you and I love you." At this point, I'm confident she's far from the minority among artists in the Christian music scene. Unless you're John Cooper from Skillet, I'm certain most others are testing the winds before they make such a public declaration of LGBTQ plus affirmation. I was not surprised by her position. Not only was she dropping hints over the past few years on her social media that she's growing more critical of conservative theology and reevaluating norms of evangelical Christianity, but I'm not surprised because of the very reason why I've always liked her as an artist. Listen to her albums, and you will hear carefully worded reflections on the pain and brokenness of the human experience. Her songs depict a heart for the hurting, and that has always resonated with me. And here's why. I'm a psychotherapist, a trauma-informed one to boot, and as someone with a mixed background, I'm multiculturally sensitive. In particular, I work with individuals with struggles over their sexuality. Now, how did I get started in this sort of field? Well, I started off as an accountability partner to friends with sexual addiction issues when I was a student at a Christian college. And then after interning at a Christian counseling center that specialized in a whole range of sexual issues, like sexual abuse, infidelity, pornography and sexual addiction, as well as, yes, unwanted same-sex attraction. Well, after interning there, I went back to my college campus where there was more friends who were struggling with this issue, and the school basically had a sort of don't ask, don't tell policy. It was very arbitrary how they would work with guys who were struggling with some sort of homosexual behavior or sexual addiction issue or sexual identity struggle. Some would get sent back to their dorms with a devotional to do, others might get kicked out of the school. So they were in a real predicament. And so God put in my heart to start up a support group for guys who are struggling with these issues. So actually, long story short, I started a support group for men on campus who are dealing with past trauma. And by God's design, all of them dealt with some sort of sexual struggle, half of which would be same-sex in nature. And I ran that group for 8 years. And of course, at some point during that period, the school finally started offering counselors on campus. And at the end of that 8 years, I had earned my master's in counseling. So now I'm also the campus counselor. So during my time there running that group, I also started graduate school to become a therapist. And I actually experienced intense discrimination in graduate school because of the work I was doing, working with guys with unwanted same-sex attraction. Well, now I'm a certified reintegrative therapist, which is a treatment approach for trauma and addictions, using evidence-based interventions, which also has been found safe and effective in helping people explore shifts in their sexuality. I do consulting with Joseph Nicolosi Jr., and I also got to work for a brief period of time with his father, Joseph Nicolosi Sr., the founder of authentic reparative therapy, the one therapy approach that is probably the most misrepresented and reviled among both liberals and conservatives alike. And because of my work in that sort of field, that's why I was experiencing discrimination in graduate school, and why I get threats to my license and to my well-being and my livelihood. I could certainly save myself much risk and controversy if I specialized in any other area. I share my background to point out that this is more than just a job to me. I care deeply for individuals with conflicts over their sexual attractions and identity, and I'm not making a ton of money off these clients. Like I said, I led a support group for years. That was voluntary. I wasn't making money off that. I was working a regular job, and then on top of it, I was going to my old alma mater to run a group because I cared. I cared deeply for these guys. And so it infuriates me when I see Christians, including my fellow conservatives with whom I agree on so much, speak so recklessly and harshly about sexuality strugglers. I'm well aware that there's a certain stream in the church that sees homosexuality only in terms of its sinfulness. Some of which go so far as to insinuate that the person having same-sex attraction experiences is, just by virtue of experiencing those attractions, is committing the sin of idolatry, just by suffering the involuntary arousal sensations and the intrusive same-sex thoughts. I can thus empathize with the impulse to assuage the burden on the person and protect them, shield them from those sort of accusations and insinuations. But to those inclined toward LGBTQ affirmation, I just have a few questions for you. Do you really want to be an ally to those with sexual attractions and self-concepts that diverge from the norm? Do you want to demonstrate love, mercy, and grace? Excellent. So do I. Then please, I implore you, listen to my plea. I put my livelihood and reputation at risk working in the most controversial field of psychotherapy and ministry because when I hear the stories of men and women with same-sex attraction, my heart breaks. I hear stories of failed attachment with one or both parents, rejection by siblings and peers, shame for not fitting the culturally bound stereotypes of masculinity and or femininity if you're a girl. I hear stories of contempt for their bodies, having body shame and not thinking they measure up. Stories of intense loneliness and anxiety. And yes, plenty of stories of sexual exploitation, to name just a few of the common factors that I see. It is quite evident that the tendencies toward homosexuality or insecurity in their gender identity are derived from these experiences. but the self-examination required to work through those root issues is difficult. It can be confusing and painful. So if you want to be a true ally, listen up. When you go along with the narrative that people are just gay, or just born that way, or they're just trans, get over it. And you deny the impact that their life experiences had on their sexual development, you are actually allying with the very wounds, developmental deficits, the ingrained lies about themselves, about others, about God, and the sin, both those sins that are committed against them and those that they have committed, that causes the very sexual brokenness that you are affirming. It is akin to attempting to ally with a trauma survivor by celebrating the alcohol abuse or self-harm that the person uses to cope with the trauma. When you ally yourself with LGBTQ activism, you are allying with the forces of darkness that seek to steal, kill, and destroy that person's dignity, sexual integrity, and the hope of marital and sexual fruitfulness, their propagation, their, their ability to have a true natural family. You are encouraging the cutting off of all those possibilities. So you see them suffering with great distress for not fitting into the norms, for having an inclination that goes against their tradition, goes against their moral values and their convictions, and you think you're being compassionate by affirming them as an LGBTQ person. I get that. There's that inclination to relieve them of that distress. But you're actually not. And actually, quite frankly, we default to LGBTQ affirmation because really it eases the burden on ourselves to do the difficult work of sorting through all those issues with them. So if you want to be a true ally to their dignity, their worth, to their wholeness and their healing, you have to get in the trenches and aid them in the process of healing and sanctification. I care far too much for men and women, and especially for children, who endured developmental wounds to see their progress in healing and reintegration derailed by a movement of misguided and really incomplete compassion. Now you may be thinking, how can you say that? You're a trauma therapist. Don't you see how traumatizing it is for these individuals to fall outside the norm and to insinuate that their feelings, their thoughts, their identity is not normal? You're traumatizing them. Well, let me show how the trauma-informed approach actually better informs where I'm coming from. You see, in trauma treatment, we commonly say that trauma reactions, such as, for example, hypervigilance or experiencing flashbacks, they are normal reactions to abnormal experiences. But we know that the trauma reactions are themselves disordered, and they lead to interference with living a safe, healthy, productive life. A trauma-informed lens leads us to ponder questions like, what happened or failed to happen in this person's life? Rather than, what's wrong with this person? We don't simply try to convince our clients that they're born that way, that everything is fine. No, we look and say like, no, something is clearly off. But we're not going to bring condemnation, but really bring curiosity. What might have interfered with their normal developmental process to bring about this potential outcome? As trauma-informed professionals, we foster curiosity about the connection between the past and the present. We educate our clients to know what types of experiences are necessary for normative development so that they can be aware of their own needs and vulnerabilities and where some of the root issues may be. We equip them to regulate their involuntary physiological and cognitive reactions. We help them establish and enforce boundaries so that their behaviors are pro-social, healing, and in line with their values. And we wisely and carefully expose them, whether mentally or imaginally or in vivo in real life, to the experiences such as those in the past that keep them bound to their distressing emotions and distorted beliefs. And so therefore we help them reprocess those experiences and gain freedom from the emotions, the distressing emotions, and the lies that they have been believing because of those experiences. Now, if you are failing to see the parallels in all of that to how we ought to address same-sex attractions and gender confusion, then I dare say you are lacking an awareness of the truth, goodness, and beauty of God's design for us, and the process that He has ordained for us to reach the norms that He has designated for our sexual development. So yes, sexuality strugglers do need compassion. But what you may be missing is that true compassion affirms the reality of God's design while offering competent help to those who desire it. We don't just say, like in the book of James, ah, yes, I see that you're poor. Go and be well. No, if you have true compassion, you notice their need, you notice their lack, and you provide something that they may be missing. That's what motivated me all those years ago when I started becoming an accountability partner to different friends, some of which I didn't know very well at first. But I saw the great need. I saw that sort of don't ask, don't tell approach. I saw all the other people who just thought it'd be cool to have a gay friend, but didn't look beyond the attractions, didn't look beyond the LGBTQ identification, and saw the hurt at the root. And I saw I have a responsibility as someone who has a friendship with some of these individuals to not just make them feel good, but to aid them in their own process, their own journey of making the connections, connecting the dots between the past and the present, of providing for them new experiences in the present, of here's a guy who's masculine, who's secure in his masculinity, who has no same-sex attraction, and yet accepts you and can affirm you as a man. I see it as that is a responsibility I have as my brother's keeper. So if you have that desire to show compassion to those who are outside the norm in some ways, sexually or relationally or in their gender identity, then the best way you can be a true ally to them is to ally with God's design for them, to ally with the work that the Holy Spirit wants to do in their life. You can be part of that solution. You could be someone who helps restoring them gently, like it says in Galatians 6. When you see a brother caught in a sin, you who are spiritual, restore that person gently. You have a great opportunity. So my appeal to you is to get in line with what God's true design and intention is for our sexuality and see how you can be an instrument of bringing back integration and then wholeness so that we can be really who we were really meant to be. We can become who we are. So, as I end all my videos, please know that the way that God wants to bring that about is through Jesus' love for you, which is free, full, faithful, and fruitful.